Da Dang. Chapter 55. On the Spring Festival's eve, the entire Chu household was busy hanging red lanterns up high and giving out red packets, while women and children were gathering by the stone-made landscapes and setting off firecrackers. It was then that Qiu Luan arrived with 12 of his Jin Yue, all dressed in colorful embroidered uniforms and donning twin branches of plum blossoms in their hair. Together, they carried extensive gifts for Chu Feng to celebrate the Spring Festival. The fact that people like them were paying an official visit to the mansion was actually creating troubles for Chu Feng. After all, the one last standing principle of the Yang society was its anti-eunuch claim, yet Chu Feng also didn't dare to publicly embarrass the weaving and sewing bureau. Hence, dressing neatly and formally, Chu Feng waited in the courtyard to greet them. The first words out of his mouth as he saw Qiu Luan was, "This humble official, Chu Feng, wishes Du Gong a happy spring festival." Qiu Luan looked exceptionally gorgeous today. He had a newly plucked pheasant tail pinned to the left side of his cap, which pointed upwards like a small sword, bringing out the lively spirits of him. On his body was a bright red brocade robe, lavishly embroidered with floral patterns and pythons, all in golden threads. Hearing Chu Feng's words, Qiu Luan casually cupped his hands in return. "Happy Spring Festival to you, Master Chu." Being blatantly arrogant, Qiu Luan made his way into the hall, forcing Chu Feng to follow behind, walking as he busily signaling to the women in his household to remove themselves from the occasion. "There's no need," Qiu Luan waved his hand and smiled nonchalantly, "I'm not really a man." The words made Chu Feng's heart sink deep into a foreboding sea. After they both stepped into the hall and had the tea served, Qiu Luan sat down in the main seat while Chu Feng stood waiting in the guest seat below. With a fist and palm salute, Chu Feng initiated, "This one should have paid respects to Du Gong first but didn't expect Du Gong to visit before this one could." Regardless of whether Chu Feng's words were meant as a polite exchange or an actual question, Qiu Luan did not answer. With a slight flick of his finger, he signaled the Jin Yue to bring forth a box wrapped in brocade. "Lao Zuzong had instructed me to bring this for your father." The box was opened, revealing a flagon of rice wine and 2 wine cups. Chu Feng put on an extremely grateful attitude, exclaiming, "This one's father is gravely sick and bedridden, so this one will kneel on his behalf for Lao Zuzong's utmost kindness." "So, I've heard." Qiu Luan invited him to rise. "Come, let's enjoy it together for your father's sake." As he said so, one of the Jin Yue approached to unseal the wine and pour it out. Chu Feng was summoned by Qiu Luan to sit beside him, which he politely complied and then respectfully raised toast with Qiu Luan. "This one humbly hopes for more mercy from Du Gong in the future." Naturally. Qiu Luan held his cup, watching Chu Feng drink, who, after merely making a gesture of drinking, suddenly appeared as if he had recalled something, leaving the wine inches from his lips. "Du Gong, about Zheng Xian." Qiu Luan squinted his eyes and smiled slowly. "He's a branch on the Eastern Depot's side, he will be pruned sooner or later." Seizing such an opportunity, Chu Feng put down his cup and swore fiercely, "If Du Gong wishes to eliminate Zheng Xian, this one is willing to do anything." Yet Qiu Luan's gaze was fixed on that untouched cup. He frowned somewhat unhappily. "Hey, you haven't drunk your wine." Chu Feng quickly picked up his cup again, smiling ingratiatingly, "This one doesn't dare to drink before Du Gong." Smile bloomed on Qiu Luan's face, wider than Chu Feng's and much more unrestrained than Chu Feng's. "Fine, fine. I'll drink first." He lifted his cup to his lips, and mere instants before he tilted back to drink, he too, was distracted by something all of a sudden. Frowning, Qiu Luan asked, "There's someone named Jin Tang, did he die under Zheng Xian's hands?" Hearing that name was like a powerful punch right on Chu Feng's head. He was stunned. "Du Gong, where did you hear about that?" "I had inquired about all the matters concerning Zheng Xian, big and small, before coming to Nanjing." Qiu Luan tapped the small table between them. "I heard that this Jin Tang had something with you as well." Chu Feng's lips immediately moved, as if he wanted to say something. Yet, after a long, silent hesitation, what finally came out of his mouth was, "We were nothing but passing acquaintances. We've hardly exchanged a few words." Qiu Luan's expression changed. He rested his elbow on the table, noticeably distancing himself from Chu Feng. After an ominous silence, he suddenly said, "Drink the wine." Chu Feng lowered his head for a glance at the cup and faked 2 coughs. "This one has a bad throat and thus, cannot drink." Qiu Luan slapped the table violently, which immediately prompted the Jin Wei to move. Some of them grabbed Chu Feng and pinned him down, some of them pried open his mouth, and the rest forced the wine down his throat. The maids waiting in the hall were utterly terrified, dropping to their knees and trembling with their heads wrapped in their arms. "I was going to play civil with you," Qiu Luan shook his sleeves in disdain, "but you just have to test my patience." The Jin Wei enclosed Chu Feng in the middle like an iron barrel. Through the thick wall made of human flesh, Chu Feng cried in anguished, Why? Qiu Luan patted the arm of the nearest Jin Wei and handed over his own cup of wine as well, and Chu Feng's choking cough followed immediately. "Well, I'm already in Nanjing, so why would Lao Zuzong still need you?" Qiu Luan sneered as he stood up, leaning sideways on the shoulders of his Jin Wei and peered inside. Chu Feng was already bleeding from all his visible orifices and barely able to breathe in. "Zheng Xian's faction is redundant and you think your Yang society is not." He watched on dispassionately as the light faded from Chu Feng's eyes, as life slowly departed from the body in the chair. "From now on," he said, "there should only be one cloud remaining in the sky of Nanjing. He's dead." The Jin Wei turned around to report, his words rather informal, yet Qiu Luan didn't seem to mind at all as he whispered more instructions, "Go to his study, bring me all the documents, letters, anything with ink." The Jin Wei knew his intentions well. Since Chu Feng and Zheng Xian were constantly clawing at each other, he must have plenty of blackmail material hidden in his mansion. Taking everything from Chu Feng saved them the trouble of collecting similar intelligence piece by piece. Leaving half of his men behind, Qiu Luan swaggered down the hall. While he was halfway out of the mansion, he pointed at a maid on the side, shouting, "Your young master has died of sudden illness, find someone to take care of the body." ******. Xiaoyulo left the door open, humming a light tune as he swept the floor. On the table were 2 fish and a strip of meat, they were gifts from the school. Hearing the sound of the door from the courtyard, he put down the broom and saw that Liao Jixiang had returned with a jug of wine and some packages of cooked food. "What kept you occupied?" Xiaoyulo took over the items in his hand and asked casually. The streets and alleys around them were all filled with the sound of firecrackers, which Liao Jixiang took advantage of and pretended not to hear the question. He was indeed returning late and he was blushing, looking embarrassed. Xiaoyulo didn't notice his unusual appearance. He opened the paper wrappings and poured out the wine, then he grabbed Liao Jixiang's arm and fed him a piece of cooked food. At that moment, Liao Jixiang's eyes darted away, not daring to look at Xiaoyulo. Only then did Xiaoyulo sense something was wrong. "What's the matter?" Liao Jixiang remained silent, lowering his head and shaking it. Xiaoyulo cupped Liao Jixiang's chin and gently lifted his head. And so, Liao Jixiang looked up, his face still glowing pink, timid and shy, much more attractive than a fresh blossom in spring. "Tell me, what's wrong?" Liao Jixiang seemed to be overwhelmed with shyness. He lowered his eyes and muttered, "It's nothing." Xiaoyulo knew his temperament well, that Liao Jixiang would never relent under force. "Come," he said, wrapping one arm around Liao Jixiang and softly guiding him towards the table. Under his touch, Liao Jixiang shivered slightly. Xiaoyulo frowned and pulled him even closer. "What happened? Did you run into bad guys outside?" Xiaoyulo recalled the incident at the eastern wall screen. He was very worried that Liao Jixiang might have encountered something similar. Yet judging by his appearance, he saw no visible injuries, and only observed a strange shyness on him. He released Liao Jixiang and smiled earnestly. I came up with a few riddles. Help me take a look. As he said so, he picked up the calligraphy brush while Liao Jixiang picked up the wine, each of them taking one cup and slowly savoring it. What Xie Yulu wrote read. It's in above yet not above, it's in below yet not below. It's unsuitable above, and it only fits below. Liao Jixiang guessed it immediately, it's one dot. He finished his wine in one gulp and snatched the calligraphy brush from Xie Yulu, dipping it in the ink. I'll give you one as well. He wrote with strength and elegance as Xie Yulu read character by character, leaning on the railing. The East Lord departs. The calligraphy was beautiful, the poetry exquisite, and the person writing it was stunning. Looking among the flowers, the bright sun sets. When Liao Jixiang's cup emptied, Xie Yulu promptly refilled it. Shining so charmingly, yet the lover was gone, remembering their past sorrows, separations, the 180 difficulties and challenges. Liao Jixiang knew that those were all for this moment of loving reunion. In silent melancholy, laughing words had no hearts. Liao Jixiang put down the calligraphy brush and looked up provocatively at him under the effects of alcohol. He was simply gorgeous, just like his powerful yet graceful calligraphy, making Xie Yulu's eyes dazzle. Is it, he guessed nervously, a door? Liao Jixiang giggled, leaning softly on his shoulder. I must have guessed it correctly. Xie Yulu thought as he lowered his head to look at Liao Jixiang's sleeve dragging over the edge of the table, ink stains dispersed all over the sleeves and the chest, which intertwined with the stains of wine. He loved him, he loved everything about him, even a stained sleeve on his robe or a tiny fingernail. Tell me, what did you run into? It was because of love that he had to ask. Liao Jixiang slid down towards his chest. Perhaps he was emboldened by the wine, he admitted, on my way back with the wine, in the alley next to ours. I've encountered two ruffians in a side alley. Xie Yulu's breath was stuck in his chest. This was far scarier than the Eastern Wall screen incident. The alley was empty, so they closed in and cornered me. Out of shyness, Liao Jixiang covered his face with his sleeve. They called me poor eunuch like teasing a dog, and then Xie Yulu gripped him tightly, struggling as he listened to his hesitant words. They took off their pants, and told me. Liao Jixiang was silenced due to his shame, which forced Xie Yulu to urge him even more anxiously. What did they say? Liao Jixiang's face glowed red under the sleeve, his tightened his lips and said, they told me to look at there. And then, Xie Yulu knew what it was. Liao Jixiang had said that word before. Last time, by the mirror, Xie Yulu had forced him to. This time, Liao Jixiang acted just like before, leaning extremely close to his ear and his voice quivering as he whispered, Ko. Xie Yulu immediately hugged him even tighter. They didn't do anything, did they? Liao Jixiang shook his head. Then, he cautiously examined him, appearing rather curious, but, he asked softly, why is it that they are different from you? Xie Yulu had never expected that one day, Liao Jixiang would look at someone else's lower parts. In a mix of jealousy and anger, he muttered unhappily, what's different? There, Liao Jixiang murmured, humming like a mosquito and burrowing into his embrace, particularly small. All of a sudden, Xie Yulu felt insecure. He had never discussed his size with Liao Jixiang, who was completely innocent and ignorant while he suffered under him while taking him in. It's not as big when it's soft. No, Liao Jixiang looked up at him from his embrace, because I was staring at it. One of them slowly hardened, Liao Jixiang admitted ever so innocently, both utterly adorable and incredibly annoying, and it was still not as big as yours. Rage took over Xie Yulu. Although, to be fair, it was less like rage and more like apprehension. Don't you take that path again. Liao Jixiang was startled, but he still asked, is it that? His hand reached down, cupping the bulge in Xie Yulu's pants and rubbing it as he spoke. Everyone has a different size. Xia Yulo's gaze at him was on fire. Liao Jixiang was so naive yet so dangerously seductive. Yes, he had to admit it honestly, I'm a bit bigger than others. After pondering for a moment, Liao Jixiang pointed outside, how about the old doorman? This time, Xia Yulo got truly angry, why are you comparing me with him? He grabbed Liao Jixiang's shoulders, speaking urgently and fiercely, don't think about this and that. To tell you the truth, I'm bigger, mightier and last longer than all of them. Liao Jixiang didn't know much about this sort of thing, nor could he tell whether what Xia Yulo said was true or not, is bigger, better. Why, don't you already know if I'm good or not? Xia Yulo undid his pants and abruptly thrust his stiff erection into Liao Jixiang's hand, you should be secretly happy about it. Yet Liao Jixiang still wasn't entirely convinced. To him, Xia Yulo was never a mighty person. Xia Yulo realized what he was thinking, but as he had no other way to persuade him, he could only pull his hand and plead, don't look at others, okay. Liao Jixiang was silent at first, then, after playing with the big object in his hand for a while, he slowly nodded. Xia Yulo sighed. He was in fact still worried, and he suddenly understood why Mei Aza and the others were so cautious. He alone couldn't keep Liao Jixiang safe at all. From now on, wherever you go, I'll go with you. It's all right, Liao Jixiang said, pulling his own pants loose and diligently rubbing Xia Yulo, I'll take the main road. Xia Yulo hugged him tightly as he trembled, I don't even feel like letting you go out at all. Liao Jixiang looked at him lovingly, guiding his hand to his ass, your finger, he said. Immediately, Xia Yulo obediently extended his middle finger, which Liao Jixiang grabbed and inserted into himself, we should do it often, and it'll open easily. Is this seduction? Xia Yulo was stunned. In the meantime, Liao Jixiang leaned in to lick his face a couple of times, then he took that hardness of Xia Yulo and rubbed it against his own barren, flat surface, saying shyly as he did so, release a little over here. Xia Yulo's legs went so weak that he was about to collapse, huh. Pour your essence here, Liao Jixiang's voice was growing softer. As Xia Yulo looked at his pale hips, he roughly understood his intention, this won't work. It can't make you erect. Even if it can't give me an erection, Liao Jixiang bit his lip in embarrassment, growing some hair would be nice too. Xia Yulo was taken aback. He glanced at Liao Jixiang's clean, hairless private parts, but it's nice now, smooth and fair. But they all have hair, Liao Jixiang looked at him aggrievedly, and I want some too. Xia Yulo's heart immediately softened, okay, okay. He gripped his hardness at the base and inserted it between Liao Jixiang's thighs, hold tight, he began to thrust back and forth, when it comes out, I'll smear it all over you. For a moment, Xia Yulo felt that he was less like Liao Jixiang's man and more like his medication. End chapter. Dang. Chapter 56. Xia Yulo leaned over Liao Jixiang's shoulder, brushing his hair aside and checking the wounds on his neck. They're better now. All scabbed over, he said. As Liao Jixiang couldn't see for himself, he nervously stared at Xia Yulo, bring me a mirror. I want to see it. There's no need for that. Xia Yulo rubbed the tip of his nose against Liao Jixiang's, everything about you is beautiful to me. The corners of Liao Jixiang's eyes blushed brightly as he smiled in shyness, nonsense. He rolled over in bed, trying to ride on top of Xia Yulo, yet the moment he stretched his leg, he moaned in pain. What happened? Xia Yulo lifted the blanket, wanting to take a look, but Liao Jixiang quickly held the blanket in place. The pain came from the area between his thighs, where he urinated out of. Feeling a little embarrassed due to his nakedness, Liao Jixiang reached down and felt for the region by himself, the skin around there felt swollen. It's all your fault, he shoved Xia Yulo in annoyance, I told you not to rub it but you did anyway. What is it? Xiaolu, still puzzled, he lifted the corner of the blanket and followed Liao Jixiang's hand to that patch of soft flesh. Oh dear, he looked at Liao Jixiang rather concerned, it's really swollen. What do I do now? Liao Jixiang panicked, for he was feeling both embarrassed and worried. How can I see a doctor when I have problems here? Come, let me take a look, Xiaolu said as he dug him out from the beddings, pushing his thighs apart and lowering his head for a closer look. Liao Jixiang's face reddened as he fixed his gaze at the bed frame above, while the corner of his vision still catching glimpses of his own bare, fair legs. Just as he felt the most ashamed and irritated, Xiaolu shocked him by bringing his nose mere inches away from his swollen parts and sniffed audaciously. What are you doing? Liao Jixiang punched him hard on the shoulder twice, and Xiaolu immediately retreated. I was just checking if it was smelling odd. What odd smell? You're the one with an odd smell. Liao Jixiang covered his lower parts and scolded him angrily. You just have to rub me down there, what's so good about it? Feeling wronged, Liao Jixiang blurted out some hurtful words, if you like women, go find one. Which made Xiaolu a bit annoyed as well. Yang Chun, you're letting your temper loose again. That's how eunuchs are, Liao Jixiang insisted stubbornly, even defiantly, you made me swollen, and now you're complaining. It was you who asked me to release over there. How many days has it been? To rub it on you every day, every night, of course it'd be swollen. So, it's my fault. Liao Jixiang retorted sharply, last night, who was the one? Burying his head down there and licking endlessly. Last night, Xiaolu indeed had him stand on the bed while he knelt and licked him for a long time. All right, let's stop arguing, he said, getting out of bed and putting on his shoes. I'll fetch some water, so you can wash. Despite their little quarrels, when the water was brought in, Xiaolu still needed to hold Liao Jixiang in his arms and wash him carefully because Liao Jixiang couldn't squat down with his left leg. Xiaolu washed him very carefully, covering everywhere from the front to the back. By that time, Liao Jixiang had already softened, his head resting quietly next to Xiaolu's neck, his hand shifting downwards and gripping Xiaolu's wet hand. It's not because of you rubbing it, okay? Xiaolu responded indifferently. Liao Jixiang wanted to make peace, yet he didn't know how, so he whispered, once it's better, you can do whatever you want. At that moment, Xiaolu turned and kissed his cheek, then he fetched a cloth and wiped him clean. You are my lord and my treasure. He tossed an outer garment to him, don't wear pants for the next few days. If you need anything, I'll go out for you. And so, Liao Jixiang got out of bed with his bare bottom, wearing only a robe. As soon as he stepped onto the ground, they heard someone pounding on the door to the courtyard. The old gatekeeper opened the door and a group of officials burst in, carrying iron chains in their hands. Is there a eunuch in this house? Come out. Xiaolu rushed over, trying to block this large group of men with his own body. What's the matter? Let's talk about it first. The leading officer was considered a reasonable man, for he only kicked Xiaolu once. Recently, there's been a mad eunuch running naked down the alley, and he scared the daughter-in-law of Master Wang, of the Ministry of Revenue. We're here on orders to arrest him. Is there a eunuch in this house? Yes, there is. Xiaolu tried to stop them from approaching the main chamber, but he's not insane. Yet they pushed Xiaolu down, their filthy boots stepping on him as they marched forth. We don't want to hurt anyone. That mad eunuch has a knife scar on his left buttock. Let the eunuch come out and show us. To show them his buttock. Xiaolu shook his head and refused. Ha! The officers laughed out loud. If he won't come out, we'll go in and see. Wait. Xiaolu pondered over it for a moment. Knowing that there was no other way out, he got up from the ground and said, one of you can come in with me to check. These men clearly weren't looking to cause unnecessary trouble, nor did they actually care about seeing a eunuch's bare buttock. Upon appointing a young officer in his 20s among them, they waited for him to follow Xiaolu inside. Liao Jixiang had heard about everything while he was waiting inside the room. By the time the door opened, he was standing solemnly by the window, dressed in white from head to toe with his hair loosely tied. The young officer was momentarily taken aback. The man in front of him was certainly a eunuch, for he had a slender profile with delicate, slim shoulders and a gentle jawline, yet he could tell the sense of pride in his frailty, and feel the power of authority in his elegance. Xiaolu closed the door, ran to the table, and began to rummage through the drawers. He looked up and down, and was only able to locate a few hundred coins, which he wrapped in a piece of cloth and tried to stuff into the young officer's hands. "When you leave, just say that you've checked," he earnestly assured him. "He's really not the one." The young officer glanced at the bundle and reached out to push Xiaolu away, clearly unimpressed by the meager bribe. "Pants," he pointed at Liao Jixiang, "take them off." "How could you?" Xiaolu tried to reason with him, but before he could argue, the officer glared at him fiercely. "Resist any further, and both of you," his finger shifted frequently between the two, "will be arrested together." Xiaolu fell silent. Seeing the officer walking towards Liao Jixiang, he immediately threw himself over them to intervene. Within an instant, the officer had grabbed Liao Jixiang's arm and lifted his robe, revealing a snow-white section of his calf. The young officer was astonished, for he was not expecting a eunuch without pants. His face turned bright red instantly. Holding Xiaolu's hand, which was now clasping over his shoulder, he said, "I don't care what you do with him at night. I'm here to inspect." As he spoke, he tried to lift the robe even higher. In the meantime, Liao Jixiang had grabbed hold of a pair of small golden scissors for trimming bonsai from the window sill, ready and aiming it at the officer's throat. Just as Xiaolu saw it and was about to shout, "Don't," the other officers outside suddenly called out urgently, "Xiaolu! Time to go." The young officer glared at the two of them, as if looking at a pair of adulterers. Yet the officers outside were still shouting, "Hurry up!" Like protecting a treasure, Xiaolu put himself between the officer and Liao Jixiang, forcefully pulling the officer's hand down, grumbling, "Don't you hear them calling you? Hurry up and go." The moment the young officer stepped out of their household, Xiaolu immediately released Liao Jixiang and put on a cloak, readying to leave. Still feeling a little frightened, Liao Jixiang grabbed him in a hurry. "Where are you going?" "I'm visiting Qiuluan. Even if I die, I must get a letter from him," Xiaolu said determinedly. "With his letter, we won't ever need to be afraid of anyone in Nanjing." "But you," Liao Jixiang looked at Xiaolu with pain in his eyes, "doesn't that mean you'll be on the eunuch's faction again?" The look in Xiaolu's eyes as he turned towards Liao Jixiang said it all. Everything he did was for him. "I don't see any other way." He broke free from Liao Jixiang's hand and dashed outside. By this time, the officers had already left, and the old gatekeeper was still standing at the door, peering out towards the street, which was rather bustling today. As Xiaolu passed by, he asked casually, "What's happening?" "They say," the old gatekeeper stared blankly at the street, "the Weaving and Sewing Bureau is leading troops to arrest someone named Zhang Xian." The words compelled Xiaolu to a stop, his cloak still unfastened, which slipped from his shoulders as his hands let go from the shock. *******. Qiuluan had brought along the emperor's imperial decree to lay siege around Zhang Xian's mansion. The soldiers reached a stalemate for a day and a night, during which sporadic skirmishes occurred. The final result was no surprise. 3 days later, people saw Tu Yao's severed head on display at the top of Tongji Gate, his eyes shut forever, looking nothing like a hero. Soon, notices were posted on several main avenues in Nanjing, announcing that on the second day of the second month, Zhang Xian would be executed in front of Chaotian Palace. Following a long list of numerous convoluted charges were the words circled in bright red, reading death by lynching. As eunuchs had already suffered once under knives during their cleansing, the emperor would usually show mercy by excusing them from being beheaded. Thus, the eunuchs would mostly face two types of executions, lynching or flaying. Most powerful eunuchs preferred the former, for it was said to be more tolerable. The day of the execution was bright and sunny. Over half of Nanjing became empty, for everyone, scholars and farmers alike, all crowded towards Chaotian Palace. Initially, Xia Yule was not planning to go, but Liao Jixiang was sitting still by the window and woefully said, "Even in the face of death, no one is there to send him off." And so they went, carrying a small flagon of cheap wine. When Xia Yule thought about what had happened, he couldn't help but feel pity for Zheng Xian, for he probably couldn't even recognize the characters that formed his own sentence on the royal decree that Qiu Luan had displayed to him, which was sealed with a red stamp. The rivalry between those with power was just like harvesting chives. After cutting away the old batch, a fresh batch would soon grow up, momentarily alive and strong. None of the batches was particularly better than the others, for they were all scrambling and chasing after a tiny bit of power, which made them all the same. A sea of people had already gathered in front of Chaotian Palace. From afar, they could see the high platform with flags erected, and on it knelt a stripped man with his hands tied behind his back. It was Zheng Xian. Xia Yule squeezed through the crowd, pulling Liao Jixiang behind him. The face on the high platform was pale and disheveled, deprived of its usual cosmetics and luxurious silk and embroidered brocade, yet the beauty of it remained totally undiminished, as radiant as a spring peach blossom. Xia Yule guarded Liao Jixiang and brought him to the nearest front, where the high platform was within reach and a lift of their heads. Then, he pulled out the bottle of wine. Only then did he realize that he had forgotten to bring a cup in his haste to leave. The executioner could tell that they were there to pay respects, and by custom, they must be allowed. So, he tugged Zheng Xian forward and pressed him lower, making him kneel at the edge of the platform, so that he could barely manage to see the people below. Liao Jixiang rolled up his sleeves and cupped his hands, so Xia Yule could pour the wine into them. Once full, he carefully raised the wine towards the platform, spilling and dripping quite an amount in his attempt, while Zheng Xian stared down at them, his eyes filled with shock. "Why are you here?" he murmured, but Liao Jixiang only scooped his hands again, waiting for Xia Yule to pour more. Xia Yule, however, was in a daze, for he was still astonished in his realization that Zheng Xian had known all along, that Liao Jixiang was in Nanjing long ago. Those hands were fair as snow, washed in the wine and shimmering under the sun. Very carefully, they offered the contents to Zheng Xian. All they could deliver was a few drops, just enough to wet those long dried lips before it was all gone. For all this while, Zheng Xian was staring at Liao Jixiang, and he only noticed Xia Yule when his senses returned to him. Almost instantly, the look in his eyes turned vicious, and he transformed from a condemned prisoner to the lofty, powerful Dedang he once was, growling at Xia Yule, "You damned dog." The crowd began to stir, and the executioner began to pull him back. Refusing to back off, Zheng Xian struggled and wrenched, his face and eyes glowing red with effort as he screamed in sorrow and resentment at Xia Yule. "What makes you worthy?" he roared. "What makes you worthy of having him?" The executioner dragged him down, yet he rolled over and got up again, abandoning his very last grain of dignity. Then he turned to look at Liao Jixiang, full of envy and longing. "And what makes you worthy?" He was already completely helpless, broken, and desperate, almost on the edge of tears. "What makes you worthy of a Xia Yule? Time's up." The executioner dragged Zheng Xian back like how one would drag a dog, and the supervising officer dropped the order for execution. Liao Jixiang immediately turned around, his hand gripping tight around Xia Yule's. Behind them, the crowd erupted in excitement, every one of them infected with a zealous joy. Many in the front rows even held their arms high, waving a coin in their hand, so that they could buy the slices of flesh cut from Zheng Xian from the executioner. While the crowd surged continuously forward, only the two of them were trying to push their way out. Occasionally, one or two passers-by would spit at them, out of their contempt at eunuchs and those on their side. Suddenly, they heard Zheng Xian's agonizing scream piercing the air behind them, like precious silk being torn apart, the voice so sorrowfully shrill that it hurt their ears. 3,357 cuts. Qiu Luan had truly unified Nanjing. Liao Jixiang had practically fled from Chaotian Palace. For so many times, he had been too close to Lingqi, and there were several times when he was merely inches away. Xia Yulu supported him as they walked out of the Xian gate, where they noticed a group of men digging a pit at the base of Zheng Xian's large stone memorial. Right next to them, a few others were tying ropes over the stone. The tablet had not been erected for long before it had to be pulled down and buried. At the corner where they were supposed to take a turn, Liao Jixiang paused. "We're out of vinegar," he said, as he continued straight ahead. "King Chinda's vinegar is good." Xia Yulu understood that he was feeling upset and didn't want to go home yet. So, he accompanied Liao Jixiang. On their way there, they passed by Suanjin Bridge and heard Wang Lu'er singing from afar. From under the bridge, they saw her standing there, her belly huge and her face covered in dirt. Next to her was a tall monk, who recited a prayer for her and stuffed a few coins in her hands. "Is that?" Xia Yulu wanted to call out, but Liao Jixiang held him back. That was indeed a familiar figure, yet it was also a memory that belonged only to the past. "What shall we eat tonight?" Liao Jixiang leaned closer to Xia Yulu, gently holding his hand. "Anything," Xia Yulu thought for a moment and smiled. "You always burn the food anyway." Liao Jixiang immediately retorted, "It's because you can't handle the fire." Spring had arrived. Children with tiny braids were holding pinwheels high in the air and playing in the streets. Life in Nanjing went on leisurely and elegantly, like it always had been, and like it always would be. As a gentle breeze passed by, it carried Wang Lu'er's song light and far, tenderly lifting the corners of lovers' sleeves. I heard the fledgling crows cry. Their cries shatter the night and beckon spring's sigh. I recalled the late-night drizzle moisten the bank's sand. Its fragrant breeze passing through many a land. I saw the colored tiles on the painted buildings, all washed anew. I saw the wooden swing frames down below, colored ropes half wet by dew. Upon waking, the red sun shone through my muslin windows. And I heard the street vendors selling apricot blossoms in rows. End of the main story.